Look, same Learning Cafe, and all of you know about Learning Cafes. I won't spend much time to have a new logo. Where the new focus is going to be, very much as before, it is going to be on practice leadership. So there is a gap is to discuss and share practices about how that thought leadership and wonderful ideas that we have can be actually converted into reality in complex organizations that we work in constrained resources, changing priorities. It's going to be community driven as ever, free and frank discussions, not much of a sales, in fact, no sales angle at all in Learning Cafe discussions. A new focus is actually going to be starting to integrate KM productivity collaboration to support organizational objectives. I think we all kind of realize that learning in a silo can only do so much, needs to be embedded in the flow of work or whatever term you want to use. But having said that, it is more complex to do that. So we'll be discussing that a lot more, basically focusing on organizational scalability, adaptability, and cost effectiveness of learning. So it's kind of at the enterprise level. And I'm pleased to say that we'll be kind of looking beyond just Australia and New Zealand so that we don't exist within our own silo, mental and practice silo. So we will be got Anish from Singapore as the first cab of the ranks. So that's about Learning Cafe, but pretty much very similar to what you were used to a few years ago. So what's coming up very quickly? The next webinar is going to be on use cases for AI. And as you will discover in this webinar, there is going to be a lot of discussion around AI because this year has been a watershed event with the release of ChatGPT and the extensive use. And the one after that in March is around effective governance without the pretense. So essentially, how do we actually make it effectively work? And there will be meetups in Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane, starting with Sydney kind of next year, send more details. But do sign up for, and I'll send you the link in the chat as soon as I finish. Just sign up so that you know what's happening and what's coming. Okay, so as promised, the 2 collabs we are running, and collabs are really kind of active community of practice or interest, which actually do some hands-on experimentation. So the first collab is the product management in learning. So I think Juhi might be one of the 2 leads. One is a panelist, Jason Greca. You shall hear him talk shortly with background in New South Wales education and Microsoft product management. Then we've got Juhi King, who is the current technology product manager for Chartered Accountants ANZ. So certainly we'll be starting up the product management collab next year. The other one with slightly different flavor is kind of actually experimenting with AI in learning use cases. And we're pleased to announce that we've got 2 mentors. One of them, Neil Sequeira, is actually online, and John might be too. Both are not from learning background, they are from AI background. Neil has a deep expertise in innovating and implementing AI and other innovations in organizations. And John, if you know him, has got a huge history of serial entrepreneurship with some very successful companies. And his current iteration is actually the Pixie Network, which is kind of essentially your personal AI concierge. So we'll talk more about that. So hey, Neil, if you're online, if you just want to say hello so that we can see you on camera.
Hello.
Juhi, if you're online, if you want to say hello, we'll and if not, that's fine.
Hi everyone, I'm really looking forward to it, and I'm so glad you restarted the Learning Cafe, Jeevan. I appreciate it.
There you go. And Jason will be talking to shortly, and John Forrest, if you're there, if you want to say hello. He tends to be a busy man, so it doesn't necessarily join the webinars, but hopefully he's there. Right, so I just want to share a very quick research, which was the state of the organization by McKinsey. I will send a link to this in chat as soon as I finish. But essentially, they kind of looked at the 10 most significant shift-facing organizations today, kind of went through the report. It's a really good report. And learning and development, organizational learning and capability building, contributing to each one of those 10 significant shifts, right? But the one that I'm going to focus on in the next slide is kind of closing the capability chasm, because the talk about skills and capability has come up again quite actively this year, but I'm not sure we've necessarily made progress in addressing some of the issues that we had in applying, developing and designing capability skill frameworks, and more importantly, actually using them effectively. So that's something that we'll kind of discuss. And the number 5 is closing the capability chasm. And McKinsey recognizing that capability is an integrated set of people, process, technology. So it's the whole thing, just not people skills, and how all of them work in tandem. So the last iteration, which I ran, Capability Cafe, was focused on this idea. So it certainly has come back. Some stats right on top is that only 5% of organizations surveyed are actually have the capabilities that they require. The rest of them, 47, need to act now, 43 need to act soon, and 6% said they're already too late. But some of the reasons why this hasn't happened is lack of time to develop capabilities. So time to develop those new capabilities, they're still kind of focused on the present ones. So something which is interesting, and the lack of resources for training and development. So that's quite interesting, for us to make a case for more resources and being more visible and probably more demanding. What I'm going to do now is just share the slide. How effectively is organizational learning catering for business and learner requirements? The stats from the responses is that adequate. Only about 20% have said well, which is, I think, excellent. Nobody's said it was excellent. So there is a bit to go in terms of organizational learning. And I'm really pleased to have our next panelist, Maree, and also Anish after Maree, to talk about, I guess, what Maree is doing at John Holland as the General Manager Employee Experience, and plans for 2024, and challenges and aspirations thereof, followed by Anish, who will talk about similar things at Maersk. I know that all of you would know the large shipping containers, worldwide global leader.
Great, thanks, Jeevan. One, I think I put in the chat, I'm so happy to be back on the Omnibus, and like somebody said, it's great to see Jeevan back in the role that he does so well, which is kind of herding us all together and getting us to share our thinking. What I want to talk about today, and it's kind of a neat transition from the McKinsey slide that Jeevan was just sharing. When I joined John Holland, which is about 10, 11 months ago, what I found was that during the last 3-4 years, they'd admired the problem that people kept saying, we don't know how to get ahead around here. We don't know what it takes to progress. It's unclear. It seems to be who you know. What are the skills? What do I need to develop, etc. And the organisation's response, and I'm sure many of you have done this, was just provide more training. So in the areas we thought we needed, such as, project leadership, and just roll out more and kind of see what sticks and what didn't. But the feedback continued. And I think that's because, as you guys know, it's not just product that you need to push out. You need to think about the ecosystem you're working in and what it is your employees are actually looking for. So my background, as some of you may know, is I've worked in probably, 8 or 9 different industries. And some of them, I've had successes in this space, and some of them not so successes, but you learn along the way. But I've kind of tried to take that in addressing this issue for John Holland. So if you can move on to the next slide, Jeevan, that would be great. So this is actually taken from a pack we used with our team. So I'm not showing you anything that's, I've made up to make it look grander than it was. This is actually the pack we said to people. What we were looking for is, if you look at our strategic priorities we need to deliver as a business, which for us are working as one, strengths, capabilities, customer and employee experience. It was really clear that our people have said, like I said, we don't know how to get ahead. We don't know what you're looking for. Actually, other companies seem to be clearer to us in terms of what they're looking for. They're showing us their frameworks and their development opportunities, and we can't see it with you. And like everybody around, first quarter of this year, we saw huge turnover, and we weren't even sure, apart from looking at LinkedIn, what capabilities we were losing versus what capabilities were coming into the organisation as we move forward. And the key thing for John Holland is, we don't want you to come to us for a job. We actually want you to come for a career. We want you to be able to see the way ahead, whatever that is for you there. So if we take a look at the next slide. This is actually what we built, and this is Career Builder. So this is our framework, and just as it said in the McKinsey piece, we looked at the technical foundations. We're a very technical company. We're a construction company, tier 1, that builds very large buildings, roads, railways, hospitals, prisons, tunnels, big tunnel builders. So we need technical skills. We are primarily an engineering project-driven business. What we also know is that all of our competitors fish in the same pond. we're all looking for those same technical foundations. They are not a differentiator. So what we said is, what is going to differentiate us? And we took a look at the work that Marcus Bowles has done in The Future of Work, where he identified, I think it's actually 20 odd human capabilities that will remain once AI and technology, you know, kind of take over and run the world. What are those human capabilities that are going to remain? What we did was we actually looked at our strategy and said, what are the 5 that align? Because 5 is a nice, you know, kind of easy to get your head around number. The 5 capabilities that align to our strategy, but will also differentiate John Holland if we can deliver on them. And this is where you start to see some of the behavioural pieces. They apply to every person in John Holland. We've actually done them just as we have with the technical, along 5 levels of proficiency, and our leadership framework is wound into this, so we haven't separated that out. Then when you look at kind of capabilities that apply everywhere, so think of communication, negotiation, etc., where do they fit? They're part of this big lot of shared capabilities, which is a little bit like a lolly shop. You can pick or choose some, one or none, depending upon the role that you're doing, the strategy that your team has in place, or the project it is that you're working on. What was really critical for John Holland, like most organisations, is to make sure that this didn't sit separate to our values, so that it didn't feel like something that wasn't connected to John Holland. So you'll find the language of our values is actually embedded all the way through our technical and our essential, and the way we describe our shared capabilities. So what's kind of important in there is, if you look at those, like I said, all of these capabilities here have 5 levels of proficiency that build towards, you know, being an expert in the area, but they apply to all employees. This is transparent. It's also visible to employees. So it's not like we have a separate set for leadership. So if we go on to technical, because I'm sure, which is the next slide, I'm sure is actually the one that most of your business will want to look at as well. This is just an example of what a capability looks like. Sorry. So this is Workers one of our foundations. Yeah, this is the one I was after, Jeevan. Yep, stop there. So our business, of course, they go, yeah, look, that's great with all that behavioural stuff, but, you know, we're really all about technical. Isn't that what we promote on? Isn't that what we do? And at this stage, that would be correct, until we integrate Career Builder into recruitment, which is coming early next year. What we showed people within each of the 16 technical pathways that we identified, we actually showed them not only the capabilities and the level of capability that was required, but you'll see at the top of the slide there, the most likely career path that you might take in that job stream or that career stream. It's not absolute, because we all know that careers are a lattice and not a linear approach, but it was to give people a guide. What are the roles? What are the experience that I need to undertake to be successful in John Holland? The other thing that we did with our technical capabilities is they are very heavily aligned to external professional frameworks. So we're very much aligned to the Engineers Australia, the accounting profession. So for the people ones, we're aligning into RE and to the UK frameworks, and we've picked that up through virtually everything we do. Our first port of call is there a professional framework that aligns to the work that we do, so that we're making sure we're keeping our people skills contemporary. It's not just so focused on John Holland that it's not relevant for if I want to progress my career elsewhere. We know that people will. We won't have them forever, but whilst they're with us, we want them to be the best they possibly can be. So this, as you can see, has taken a lot of work. The other thing that I'll say to you is that it requires constant governance. If you are going to go down the technical skills route, there's virtually not a week goes past we're not challenged on the capabilities for senior roles. We're not challenged on the pathways, and we've had to put in place a really rigorous governance approach, almost like IT do when the way they manage change management, in terms of making sure that we're getting and we're staying aligned with our professional bodies and making sure that this is relevant to John Holland people. The other key that I would say in this is that we've actually put in place career sponsors and career owners, so stream sponsors and stream owners. So in terms of design and engineering, we'll actually have an executive who is the sponsor, and then we'll have an owner who makes sure that the framework remains relevant, and they work with us as well. So that activation is really important, because what you're then doing is actually able to give those sponsors and owners a kind of some more detailed information on what that level of capability is in the business. So it would be fair to say at this point, we didn't know if we had the capabilities we needed, or if we had an overload in one set of capabilities and not enough in another. So we've now integrated this into our HR system. So we've identified all of the roles, and each role actually has a tag for where it sits within Career Builder, so that we're able to start drawing reports down on, you know, what are the volume of people with certain skills and roles versus where we might have a gap. Now, that's early days. We've only just put that in, and we know the potential is great. What is it built on? It's built on PowerPoint at the moment. That's what our framework is built on, because at the first point, we wanted people to look at this framework, see what it is, get in and play around. So especially important is we want you to have a look at, where am I now? Where do I want to go to? What are the likely steps I need to undertake? So what we did at this stage is a really rough and ready reckoner for people to kind of write down those capabilities that are critical, the ones they want to have that conversation with their manager. That's just this year. As we go forward into next year, as I said, we're integrating into recruitment and selection, very much starting internally so that we get our promotions right. That was also key feedback from our engagement survey. And then as we move into goal setting, Q1 next year, it will actually be very evident in our drop-down menus as you're selecting goals. So Career Builder will say, put in, you know, your technical requirements. What are your John Holland essentials? You know, what is it you need to do? We're then moving out separately to the career development piece and how that will apply. And of course, we're aligning our development to Career Builder. Do you want to go on to the next slide? Yeah. Oh, no, that's it. You cut me down to 3. Okay, good on you. No, go back. That's it. So the key piece of this is, like I said, I'm showing you the technical side because our business loves technical. Our leadership and behavioural skills programs will actually go through onto the John Holland Essentials, especially, like I said, our leadership piece. If you go back, Jeevan, to the slide just before that, as I said, if you look from proficient upwards, that's where our leadership framework cuts in. So we're saying there, anyone who's a leader, this is where that framework comes in from there. And like I said, it's very much aligned to the human capabilities from the research of Marcus Bowles, where he's looked at over 300 companies worldwide. So we are early days, but the reason I wanted to do this was to give an example of responding to a business request, which is, how do we show people how to build their careers around here? How do we put it in a tool that anyone can access? Like, it's kind of in the public domain for us, and we're about to start putting it kind of front and center on our external website as well, because we're quite proud of it. We want people to know what it will take to work at John Holland. Technical skills, that's not, you know, secret IP for us, because like I said, everyone in our industry, you have to have those skills. That's what's needed. Once you get into the behavioural, we know that this is an evolution for the John Holland people built off our culture. So if you can replicate that, good on you, but this is what John Holland people will be good at. So that's kind of where that goes. If you are actually at the level where you're at and you want to stay good at where you're at, what we would say is make sure, this has been the message, keep your skills contemporary. So keep having a look in at the framework so that you're making sure you're keeping your skills contemporary. As we said, the way of work is changing, so people need to keep doing that. Just before I finish, though, and see if there's any more questions, I did just want to reference something in the AI space just to put in people's minds. Because we got a lot of this feedback through 3 or 4 years from our employee surveys, we just completed our survey. We downloaded 9,000 comments from our people and we ran our AI over them to check what the sentiments really were around career, mobility, etc. I'd really suggest you do that. It gives you more than just your platform providers tools or surface level kind of filtering of what the sentiment is. It allows you to look more closely in terms of what it looks like, and also then how to address it. We did it especially for leadership. We looked at collaboration, how to drive collaboration. It looked at our data, and then it gave us some ideas on what we might do. We looked at some of them, went, yep, doing that. Oh, I hadn't thought of that. So it's just a useful tool there. We're now planning to do the same at our end of year performance review. We want to see in terms of leaders and people, what are they saying? What can we pick up about development? What can we pick up in terms of the focus of our leaders, which we know is going to be more on the what you deliver than the how, but we want to get some data on that and some evidence we can use. So rather than going through 9,000 sets of data there, we'll do that through AI. And then as we're launching our career conversations and our development conversations next year, we're going to do the same thing there, download those development plans, and rather than either having to put them in Excel and doing whatever, try and get a feeling of the sentiment from AI and then be able to feed in your framework and see what it is people are looking for as well in there. So that was just some thinking to go forward there. I will say as well that I know this from other learning solutions, don't build this and think they will come. They won't come. We have had such a huge marketing and awareness campaign, and also next year we're kind of almost relaunching it. Turnover happens. You don't want to just see this at the time you launch, building it into induction and leader induction, and it's becoming that key foundation framework to recruitment, setting goals, assessing performance, development, etc. So we're sitting it in there. So we don't want people to be able to recite what's there, but we want them to know where to go and how to find this. Now, it's pretty rudimentary at this stage. Like I said, it's sitting on our intranet. We've at least got a front page link so people can click straight through. But we want to kind of get this into our technology more and more so it becomes part of that in the flow of work that Jeevan was referring to before. But you've got to get the sucker out there, right? You've got to get sponsorship for it. So when we ran our engagement survey this year, we had like a 17-point lift in terms of people talking about career. So we were so happy with that. And the scores lifting on the I know where to go to find the tools and support, and also I can see what the career opportunities are for me at John Holland. That's great that it lifted. We now need to maintain that. So that's going to be a challenge. It's easy to get that first lift. So that's kind of that there. I should probably go to the chat and see any questions. How are we measuring the application impact on org performance at this stage through engagement?
Hey, Maree, can I interrupt? What we might do is, if you've got questions, please ask questions in the chat to Maree in the chat.
Do you want me to
Yeah, just there, Maree. And then what we'll do is at the end of this, after Anish's presentation, we might have raise a few questions if you've got time. But I'll hand it over to Anish if that's okay, Maree.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening.
Look, over to Anish. It is a crime to give such clever people such little time because there's so much to talk about. But I promise our next year webinars will be in depth and more detail and give people more time. But Anish, hey, over to you.
Thank you, Jeevan. It's great to be back and good to see you, Maree, as well. And I totally relate to it. I mean, it's 10 minutes is too short, yeah, but I think I'll try my best. And that's the reason I'm possibly posting my LinkedIn QR code here to connect later on as well. But I think as Jeevan shared, I head the talent management for Maersk based in Singapore. And what I'm going to share with you today is more about how we're looking at reimagining our talent and performance management. Yeah. And more specifically on how we're addressing the business needs. I think that is the main thing. We can all revamp our processes, but if it doesn't meet the business needs, it wouldn't help us. So how do we really go around it? So it's more about how we approached it. I'll share with you some of the stuff what we've done, but of course, there's more we can connect later on as well. So going to the next slide, and the next 3 slides are simple and easy ones to look at. Okay, I mean, look at the word alignment, and this is what was one of our key problem statements, if you ask me, when you look at performance. Are we all aligned? Are we really speaking up? Are we having discussions to connect? So that was kind of, a theme which came out in a number of discussions, surveys, data we gathered around our performance management, for example. Yeah. When we look at the next slide, it's more around how often are we having these conversations? So if we can go to the next slide, Jeevan. Are we having performance conversations regularly? Are we having once in a year? Are we looking at it as, a very a tick mark exercise in some ways, rather than really being discussing performance, looking at improvements, sharing feedback, and helping to reflect? Yeah. So that was another theme for us to say is our business cycles are so dynamic. We pivot our business every quarter. We change some of the things. So why are conversations so rigid and structured, and they don't meet our business needs in a way? Yeah. So this was another interesting theme which came out. And the third, which I call the career trapeze, is, with the future of work, and the jobs evolving, skills evolving. I think, as Maree said, also, it's not about ladders, it's about lattice. But then how do you navigate through that? How do you look at career conversations, which are not only focused on your job, but also beyond it? They're helping you to learn, reflect, look at careers in your organization. And of course, it's not easy. It's not a straight path. You have to constantly evolve, constantly learn. So how do we make that more dynamic and interesting? How do we support our colleagues to give them tools so that they can actually use that? But I think also about how do we have, say, mentors, sponsors, and career advisors to help them through this. So this was another theme which came out in some of the discussions we had. And as we look at all these different business themes, the question comes is, where do we start from? The next slide. Yeah. There are a number of ways we can approach it. There are a number of best practices which are out there, which we can take, but will it work for us? There are a number of other very interesting things people are doing, like left field ideas, totally changing all of this stuff. Is that really the context of our organization? I think so. We had read all the stuff, did all the good research, but one thing what we started to do was we said, okay, internally at Maersk, we actually use a concept called as working backwards. So we did apply that into this process as well as we started, and I will show you a high level view of what that looks like in the next slide, Jeevan. So this is the concept of working backwards. It's definitely, I think Amazon started it. It's not our proprietary kind of a concept. Many of you would be familiar with it. But this kind of focused quite a lot on identifying the business problem. So as I said, we did some surveys. We spoke to a number of leaders as well, what's going on, what the themes are, and started to kind of look at what are the big things we would be tackling. How do we really look at what the business problem is? Who's our customer? That is the first basic thing, which at times we may think it's easy and simple, but if you're not very clear about who's our customer, what are their business problems, what do they need, what are the themes coming out? If we solve those, will that actually help them, and how will that help the business as an end customer? So we did a number of these things, definitely using some design thinking approaches to also working backward approaches to say, how do we really make sure we're doing the right thing? Yeah, addressing the business needs. Of course, the business needs are going to evolve. I know, we all know that, but what are the core ones we can address? And then also have an agile design, which helps us to continue this iteration as we go along. Yeah, so it was not like we waited for too long. We also use the concept of MVPs, which is minimum viable product. Create something, release it. And if you ask me, we've possibly done 2 or 3 iterations as we launched some of this work early in this year. So we're continuing to kind of do that. It's one thing, even I am relatively new to Maersk, 18 months. So I learned a number of these concepts, which I found useful. One of the things I'll highlight here is something which is written there in Select Solution, PR FAQs. PR stands for press release, FAQs are FAQs. And this is a very interesting concept. As you start and very early on in your feasibility or design stage, you literally write a press release. So if we're going to launch this on the 2nd of November, 2022, what would we communicate to our colleagues and leaders? What are we offering? What are we solving? How we do this, and create that vision, and clarity of what's required there. So that's you need to do a lot of work to put that press release, if you ask me, but that makes you think quite a lot, address all business needs. Similarly, then, there's a number of FAQs which are part of, that kind of document, Some of them are mandatory, some of them you create more on. It's like, who's the customer? How are you measure? What would be the adoption measures? What would be the impact measures? What would be the risks? And you start to discuss, ideate, and bring all that together before you start the development, before you start even possibly a lot of design. But I think that rigor helped us quite a lot. We engaged with a lot of business leaders in this process, as I said, bring in a number of business leaders again and again, test number of these things with leaders so that they know what's going on, how would we address this, etc. And that helped us to kind of bring something which is more flexible, aligned to business needs. And as I said, we continue to get feedback and improve and iterate this further. So maybe we go to the next slide in the interest of time. And these are 4 things on one slide, but this is the hard work of almost 18 months. Okay, I wanted to summarize it, but what we did was as I said, it was around performance conversations, career conversations. Because of alignment, I think we saw a huge need for structuring team conversations as well. And definitely, what people used to call talent reviews, we kind of termed it as talent conversations. And how do we take it from there? Now, all of these, if I say that there are resources, information, and capability nuggets around these 4, and they're like, meeting in a box. So if you need to run a team conversation, a leader can actually pick that, simple few assets and run that conversation. Of course, I think the work starts as we start to introduce this. It's also a cultural shift. I wouldn't think it's only a skill and capability kind of, a process change. It's all about the cultural shift where we kind of term this program overall as, maximizing performance, alignment, and career growth for talent. So it's impact. And how do we build some habits around psychological safety, speaking up, growth mindset, so that helps people to really do these conversations, share feedback, and improve the processes and the customer. So maybe I can show you some of the snippets in the next slides in terms of what we did. So again, looking at personas, giving people clarity on what to expect, how to do it. So we built some of these and we've continuously, if you ask me, upskilling our colleagues and leaders as well, so that they can have these conversations. That is now the focus for us, to continue this in terms of building capability of how we can do this better and better and better. So I think the journey has kind of just started, I would say, with this in terms of capability building. But this sets a nice context for us in terms of how we approach it, how we kind of give people different ways to do these conversations. And I think, more importantly, how actually it helps the business to perform better and transform at the same time. Yeah. Maybe you can go to the next slide, and it has quite a lot of documents or materials. What you see here, and a lot of this was through like, what do you need, and how can you use that? So a very easy way for them as colleagues and leaders to go find the information they need and use that. And we have, again, as I said, we started with some of the big things, then we simplified it further. We've digitized some of this also now, and the journey, if you ask me, continues. I'm going to pause here. I know I've given you kind of introduction. It's 10 minutes, so it's going to be too much to get into the details, but happy to look at some of the questions in the chat and respond or connect later on as well.
Hey, Anish, thanks for that. I mean, what I really love is just the clean style. So is that like the Maersk? I guess it's the Maersk style kind of applied to make the content a little bit more easy for, I guess, people using it to understand. So do you got a fairly competent team to convert the content into something that will be visually accessible and pleasing?
Yeah, I think we do have a team which was involved to see how we simplify it. And I would definitely say, I think, at times this is like the second or third version. I think we've moved on, but it was the iterative process of getting feedback. So even in our working backwards, there's a huge focus on testing. Yeah. So we would literally take an MVP product, get in 20 leaders in a call, give them the context and ask them to give feedback. So we literally took it to the users and got that feedback, and that helped us to say, oh, this is too complex, this is too wordy, this is too, jargon, whatever. And that helped us to, streamline and simplify. So of course, the design, the style, yes, there's some Maersk kind of, specific things there. But the main thing for us has been how do we simplify? And I think we still have a long way to go to make it literally like a TikTok video. I think that's the attention span people have now. And how can we really, go to that? And what we do now is on a monthly basis on an intranet, we use some of that to, nudge people as a continuous approach to this.
Yeah, Anish, a quick question to you. How do you monitor the progression of what you're aiming to achieve through this program? So what are the reporting mechanisms, and how quickly, how do you, how frequently do you check in kind of things? How do you know it's on track?
Yeah, nothing great. And I think, as I said, these are some of the things we defined it up front in the PR FAQs. And there are a number of measures, different types of them. I'll possibly talk to two. One are your adoption measures, which are, how many people having conversations, and we have Workday, which we use, and we've kind of, configured it to meet our needs. Very simple, but something it tells us the conversations are happening, not the quality, I would say. So it tells you, are people picking up this? We also have number of sessions, capability sessions, which are run. So we get some of that feedback and some Mentimeters as a reaction to some of that. So that I think is progressing quite well, I would say, in terms of adoption. Of course, we saw a number of areas where we are now going to go into in a different manner. So that's one. But what we are really looking at to start measuring, and we have that, but I think you'll see the impact only from next year, is all your lagging indicators. Are we seeing change in engagement rates around, say, we use Gallup, so career development question, for example, we have 6, 11, and 12 a question there. So are we seeing that shift, and how big are we seeing the shift, and how can we correlate that to some of this work what we're doing? So we're starting to do some of that now. Do we see impact on regrettable attrition? Do we see impact on career mobility, for example, and do we see impact on DEI? So these are some of the things we have started to measure, but it's too early to see the impact. And some of these, as you can imagine, takes a while. But that's our aim to say is, can we see that shift or trends in the next year, which will roughly be close to 18 months of launch, and how we're progressing on it, and we continue to kind of evolve from there.
Hey, thank you, Anish. Thank you very much for your presentation. We'll actually now move on to the next panel, and we'll have some time at the end to talk to the panel. But the next one's kind of on learning design. Just a quick poll. Just a question we asked is, how much of the instructional design process can be done by AI? I was a little surprised to find that the number 3, which is a fair bit, was high. I wasn't expecting it to be that high as yet. So already the perception is out there that lots can be done, which is why we are very fortunate to have somebody who's actually experimented this quite actively, and looking forward to hearing what Joyce has to say about her experiments with using AI in instructional design and ADDIE process in general, followed by Damien Woods, who will also talk about the learning design process at 7-Eleven and what he's doing there. So Joyce, over to you first.
Sure, Jivan, thank you. And I am going to set my timer because I know that I can talk a lot, and I have got a lot of slides, so I will keep myself on track, hopefully. By the way, can I just say how much I'm enjoying the discussion about product management and learning, and I'm really excited about this collab. Like, definitely count me in. My role at RMIT Online for the first 4 to 5 years that I was here was our learning design director. So I was looking after how we built all of our courses, etc. And then over the last 3 years, I've moved into a new role, which is digital experience. And so I now have a team of product managers and UX and UI, and we're looking on what I would almost say is like the other part of instructional design. So if you think about instructional design is in terms of actually designing the learning and the modules and all of the content, etc. The way that the area where I'm working now is very much around the digital experience, making sure that all of our platforms are supporting the study experience, like the study journey that we are trying to orchestrate for our students and our learners. So if we go to the next slide, Jivan, you're going to hear me say that a lot. This is I know you said no sales pitch, but this is the one that I very quickly picked up from us. But basically, just a quick overview that RMIT Online Online. We support the university in delivering higher education at both the undergraduate and the postgraduate level, but we also work in workforce development, and that's exciting for myself and the team because it's actually the place where we get to experiment more because we're less constrained in terms of some of the policies, et cetera, that regulate higher education. So if we continue, Jivan, yes. One of the reasons, when I was working in the learning design space, we had a really complex ecosystem. We work with the schools, we work with industry experts. We have 6 different types of portfolios. So we have our future skills courses, which are like 6-week aimed at professional development. But we also have like these undergraduate courses. We have postgrad courses that are accelerated. We have about like 38 different intakes a year and all these different types of experiences that we're trying to orchestrate. We also have a series of different learning design build partners that we used to work with. And then we have all of these different discipline and expertise partners that need to contribute to the building of those many course experiences. And what I found the biggest challenge for myself and the team is that everyone has their own perception of what learning design is, how you do it well, what good looks like. And so what we started to do is say, all right, we need to formalize this so that we all have a shared and common language. And the reason that I'm going here first before I go into the AI piece is because I actually think it's a foundational bit, and us starting to think about not just the one learning experience, but all of the learning experiences that we create that all need to work together as a product. And this is to what you were talking about, Jason, this idea of thinking about the learning experience as a product, I think is really important. And one of the foundational things that you then need to put in place is a design system or a global experience language so that everyone is working in the same way to the same standards. And so that so that to the user of that learning experience, everything actually feels consistent and makes sense. And it doesn't feel like a disjointed experience where if you're doing this microcred, they use certain terminology, but if you do the continuing microcred, suddenly it feels like a completely different experience. So going to the next slide. So what we did is we actually took inspiration from a discipline that already does this really well, which is the user experience discipline. And we said, what can we learn from how user experience designers build their systems, and how can we apply that to the way that we do learning design inside RMIT Online? And I know Jivan has already shared these slides in the chat, so you can follow this up. This is actually a free handbook that you can download, but basically the main reason why you would want to invest in having a learning design system is that it basically makes the design reusable. You're no longer doing bespoke design, which is really it requires a lot of effort, it takes a lot of investment, etc., and the outcomes aren't as good. What it happens when you put a design system in place is it actually makes design possible at scale. So if we go to the next one, if you want to look at some examples of design systems in play, but these are user experience design systems, many organizations actually freely share what their design systems look like. We do that to a degree. Basically, when we onboard like a new delivery partner or a new design partner for us, the first thing that we do is we give them access to our global experience language, so they immediately get to see what our house styles are, so brand guidelines, etc., but also our learning guidelines. How do you design for courses for us? What does a good assessment look like for us, etc.? So you can follow up on these in your own time if this is an area of interest, and I'm always willing to talk about it as well. So what we called our global experience language, our in-house learning design system, is ABLE, and that's because it combines like look and feel type guidelines with what we think good learning guidelines look like. So, and for us, that is all about applied learning, activity-based learning. And so ours is called ABLE, which stands for activity-based learning experiences. So whether you're doing a microcred or whether you're doing like a 3-year undergraduate degree with us, every single one of those course experiences will be very much about applied learning, and it will have a similar look and feel to it. Basically, the way that we think of this is our learning activities are our building blocks, and they stack together in order to get you to a bigger activity that you need to do in terms of like achieving assessment or achieving application in the workplace. Cool. Next step. So when you think about like what are the types of things that we've actually included in that global experience language, it is things like our guidelines. So things around how do you do an assessment, what's our visual design, but also we also capture there what we already know about our students and what we already know about the user research. So that one of the problems that you always have when you work with a really large body of learning designers, and particularly for us in the case where we were like outsourcing some of the work to other learning design companies because we were scaling at pace, means that everyone is designing from their own concept of what a student or a learner looks like. And those are very often zombie personas. People very often think either about an ideal student or they think about themselves as a student. And that doesn't necessarily always reflect the actual students that we have. And so for us, a very important thing to include in our gel is this user research and, jobs to be done for the students, et cetera. All of those things are captured there as well. We then have the templates that we expect everyone to work to, the processes, some examples, of course, really, really important. And then also there's some training involved in that. Going to the next slide. We then also have quality checkpoints. I think very often it's, organizations might put like learning design frameworks in place, but they don't actually necessarily put in place the actually quality controls. And so you kind of hope that everyone is going to use your framework, but you don't actually monitor whether they are. And we have these 4 checkpoints where we check whether people are actually sticking to the standards of the of our learning design system. Moving on. So we then started to see like where are the places where we think that AI can help our learning design. And we built, as soon as they became available, we built our own GPT. It does require a GPT Plus subscription. And I've now actually set it to public. Before that, I couldn't do it, but it's just become available. What you want to do is you want to make sure that you have enough source material to actually train your learning design assistant with. So some of those things that we had in our gel now stood us in good stead because we could actually train our own GPT with those guidelines, with those standards, with the examples, et cetera, et cetera. What I found was that when you write your configuration instructions for your assistant, you have to be really direct. Now, I'm Dutch. I sound American, but I am Dutch. And we always get accused of being very direct. In this case, the more Dutch you can be in setting up your GPT, the better it is. Because what you really want to do is give it very direct instructions. And it can be a little bit temperamental. It can get quite headstrong. I have a border collie who's forever, has its own mind and wants to go off and do its thing. This chat bot was exactly the same. I said, all right, now I'm going to give you some information about authentic assessment. And all of a sudden it renamed itself as the Authentic Assessment GPT. I'm like, no, you are still the LX Design GPT. Stop changing your name. So you can be quite firm with it. I think a really good thing to do with your team is to actually do this together with your team and to kind of use it in your team meetings or as you're trying to, generate assessments, etc. Because, you'll always have like varying people who get exposure to this. And I think building this thing together so that it is a common assistant is a really good practice. And I think the other thing that I really want to kind of share with all of you is that you'll never really know how reliable it is. So keep doing feedback sessions with your team, keep tweaking it. And one of the things that we definitely find is that you want to keep the human in the loop. So human in the loop used to be just an AI science kind of term, but increasingly like we, the people who are using these things, are the humans in the loop. And we should continue monitoring the outputs. And the way that our learning design team now uses it, they say the human is the first person to touch it and the human is the last person to touch the outcomes. So you don't just leave it up to what is produced. You always have to have that sense check. They are not good enough yet to be able to trust the outcomes implicitly. Very quickly, just some examples. Jivan. This is an example, for instance, of how I iterated on the instructions, and I got quite firm with it because it kept coming up with this stuff about these debunked learning styles, and I says, please don't ever go back to this. You know, this has been debunked. So next page. Yeah, so the areas where I found it was most immediately helpful for us was in places like this, where we do the course map, where we have to write assessments and CLOs. This is an example of an authentic assessment. And as I said, what it produces, you definitely want to go back and tweak and adapt for your own context. Next step. It does an amazing job on getting you started on marking rubrics, if that's the kind of thing that you have to do, or if you have a capability matrix or a skills matrix that you need to target, then it definitely does some very good work there. And the next slide. It does a fairly good job of writing. Obviously, that's what most of us are using it for, but I do find that it can get quite wordy. And again, it takes time to train it to write in the way that you want. This is probably one of the places where you really want to give it lots and lots of instructions. And again, human in the loop. Yep. And so what do I think that it will mean? So this is like kind of like how we can immediately augment the work that we do. And this is where we started because it's very easy and very accessible for everyone. But where I think that it's going to go, I think we're going to see, and people are already doing this. We've had a bit of a play and experiments with it, which is connect these GPTs to our knowledge bases. Our intranets, our learning management systems, et cetera. And as well, and this is something that we are talking about with our B2B team as well, is, can we go to where this is eventually going to add up to? Can we begin to design at elbow work or learning assistants, basically performance agents that just help people with on the job work as they are asked as they need it. And here at RMIT, RMIT has actually set up an enterprise GPT function that we are able to use. And next year we will have some ability to start building some of these types of tutors and assistants. So that was it for me. Look, I'm very keen to keep talking to everyone about this. I'm so happy that you've reconnected everyone, Jivan. And I will duck into the meeting chat and reply to everyone who's been posting things. But as I said, always happy to be hit up and to be talking more about this. Thanks, everyone.
Hey, thank you, Joyce. That was absolutely fantastic with hands-on examples. Hey, just a quick question for you, Joyce. 12 months from now, how, or maybe even 24 months from now, how quickly will this chat GPT and other generative AI and other AI impact the instructional design process? Because I suspect it's going to have a big impact on the skill sets of instructional designers and instructors, etc. So any quick thought on that one, because we'll also cover it towards the end of the whole
So not GPT, but there is another bot that I know some colleagues of mine experimented with, and they basically set themselves a challenge of how fast can we develop a typical 12-week course. So this is in the university context, not for B2B. How quickly can we design a 12-week course if we do it with this bot? And this was one of these bots where you can give it very complex things and it will just start executing them on by itself. And they said it took them 2 days. And the reason it took them 2 days was because the humans, had to pause in order to have conversations with each other. And also they had to stop for lunch. So they basically wrote an entire 12-week course in 2 days. And I will go back and I will share with this community what that bot was. I had a go at it as well, and I was very impressed. So I think it's going to happen really fast. But the good thing about that is that because of the kind of people that we are, who've been, adopting emerging technologies for the last 20 years, and we just take whatever gets thrown at us, I think we're in a really good space to be taking advantage of that change.
Thank you, Joyce. I'm going to now hand it over to Damien. Please direct any questions to Joyce in the chat. In the meantime, Damien, over to you.
Thank you, Jeevan. And just a little caveat at the start. I had outsourced 2 children today. Both have just arrived home, so I'm hoping we'll get through unscathed, but in case there's any distractions in the background, you know why. Look, I'm going to touch on a couple of themes that have been covered in varying degrees of detail today. Particularly, I mean, there's a very clear intersection with how we're going about the design process and what Anish described at Maersk, as well as some themes Joyce has just talked to as well. But I want to frame it in the context of our business and what our business did a couple of years ago to change how we work. We moved to fully agile ways of working, and it's not probably well known exactly what that means unless you work in a business that is actually fully agile. I think there are some principles about agile that a lot of people have. It's actually fundamentally a significant change in the way a business is organised and the way work gets done. So I'm not going to give you the whole bells and whistles. Suffice to say that we work probably very differently than a lot of businesses do. One of the reasons we did that was we wanted to move faster, innovate quicker, but also be more customer-centric in the things that we were doing. And that certainly flowed into the design process that we apply in our business. One of the things agile ways of working tries to do is to avoid assumptions about customers and their needs. And we've heard lots about that already today. I think the important part in designing learning solutions is the idea of falling in love with the problem you're trying to solve before you go ahead and start solving for it. And so that means being really, really clear about the business problem you're going to be part of the solution for. And iterative design really helps you with that. And so I love this infographic about the challenges of getting what the customer needs are right up front. So you've got how your customer explained it up the start, how the project leader then understood that, how the designer then designed for it, how the developer wrote it, and how what the customer actually really needed. One of the things for me here is customers, and we all serve customers in the business, typically internal ones, but they quite often don't know exactly what they want. So part of the design process that I'm trying to build in our team is to really get in and understand and help the customer understand what it is they're trying to do. Historically, and I'm sure all of us have dealt with this, we'll have a business lead come to us with, I need a training program for ... And, you know, historically, I think we've often fallen into the trap of giving them what they wanted. So part of it starts with our people to be really good at unpicking what it is the business is trying to do and say, okay, I understand the performance objective that you're looking for. Here's how I think we can help you with that. So there's a capability profile for learning people, and they have to be able to back themselves to have those conversations with the business and get away from, you know, I need a training program for, or I need some e-learning for. The other thing in what Joyce has just talked about is a move away from instructional design and what that implies, and much more towards learning experience design. Because I think the implication of instructional design is you're building something to instruct someone else how to do something. And we know that learning is in fact something that's owned by the individual. And our job is to try and unlock that learning behaviour and process for people, and therefore focusing on the experiences that people will have to get them to the point of proficiency, I think is really, really important. So we might skip forward, Jeevan. So we have the concept, and I think Anish, you talked about this a bit, iterative delivery. And again, these graphics try to talk to the difference between a traditional way of building a product and an agile way of doing it. And a traditional way is you build it over time, but you have an end product in mind and you build for that end product. What Agile tries to do with the Agile ways of working is to build little bits of value, but loop the customer in the process. So by the time you get to the finished product, it meets the customer need. And in fact, you've probably helped them clarify their need through the process. So iterative design or agile design and delivery requires frequent delivery of value with customer feedback brought in. Here's the next bit that we've got to. What's your feedback? What's working? What's not working? How can we iterate and get the next little bit right? And so to get to those feedback loops, we're kind of fortunate because our whole business, our support office business, works that way. We work in 2-week time-bound sprints, and there are certain agile practices that we apply that the whole business does. And so it's not those kooky learning people doing something a little bit out there. It's how everyone works in our support office, which is useful. And so I'll take you through the basics of that on the next slide. So a typical 2 weeks is a sprint, and there are 5 key things you do in a sprint. First of all, you build out your backlog. So what's the work you're going to get done in the next 2 weeks? You'll do daily stand-ups to track progress, and particularly to talk about anything that's getting in the way. You will do a retro at the end of that 2 weeks. What did we say we were going to deliver? What did we actually deliver? What worked? What didn't? What did we learn from that? But the other thing is the showcasing, which is where you bring the voice of the customer in there, and you continually getting their feedback on what it is you're designing for them. So we've used this approach to redesigning some fairly significant things for our business. One great example would be, so we're a retail, convenience retail network, 751 stores, and so a store leader turnover of about 21%. We've got to train a lot of store leaders on an annual basis, and what we used to do was shoehorn everything into the first 8 weeks of those new people. We 8-week classroom-based program, expect them to absorb and learn everything, and it was clearly a crazy model. So we deconstructed that whole design and made it a 6-month journey in 3 bigger parts, starting with what is it you need to know from day one so you can operate your store safely and effectively. Let's just get you across the line on that. Then when you've got the basics, let's add the next layer. So we broke it down to run, lead and grow my store, but we did it with a very agile approach, knowing that this was helping solve a problem for our store network, who's the channel part of our business. They needed store leaders who were proficient from day one, and we had gaps. We also knew that our turnover rate was extremely high. And so I think we heard a little bit about human-centered design before. We did a lot of listening and a lot of talking to the people who help run our store network and to store leaders. And one thing we heard loud and clear was, particularly from those who left the business within the first 6 months, they left because they didn't feel proficient in their job, and they were drowning and didn't feel like they could do their job. So it was clear that we had to support them get to that feeling of, I actually feel like I'm okay at this, as quickly as we could. And that really informed our design to, okay, well, let's just do the basics first and let you get a sense of, okay, I can breathe now. I know what I'm doing to run the store. So I think the key themes there are being iterative in the design, building small bits of value frequently and testing that continually with the people you're doing it for, starting with the concept of, we're here to help the business perform better. What's the business problem you'd like us to help try and address? Stay focused on that. Building the competency of your people to have those conversations when the business come and ask for help. And then being okay with stuff not exactly hitting the mark, not working. I think that's the other really critical part, that you don't always get it right first time, and it's okay not to get something right as long as you haven't over-invested in that piece and you can pivot really quickly. Again, why doing small bits of value frequently is better than building the whole product first and realising it's missing the mark. And being okay culturally with, okay, that idea wasn't quite right. Let's take let's work on the next idea. And so that's, again, we're fortunate because that's part of our business culture, and it allows us to work that way as learning people in the business as well. So the final thing, to probably just, I mean, Joyce had some great ideas about AI and how that's sort of feeding into the work that we do in design. A couple of obvious ones. I mean, everyone's experimenting with generative AI. We find that it helps accelerate to the point of productivity, getting good ideas faster. It certainly helps, but human is always in the loop. But I think the other thing that I'm focused on as the sort of person who leads the L&D people in our business is to be curious about it, to think about, what are all the different ways it's actually being applied to create value today. We do a lot of video-based content for stores because most of our people are in stores by themselves, so that they need to learn what they need right at the point of need, and they need it to be simple. So short-form video makes a lot of sense. So my team realised that Bing AI image generator can help with storyboarding visuals for video content. And so quite often they'll use generative AI to get the sort of script, accelerate to the script for the video. They'll then get the Bing AI image generator sort of storyboard it for them, and then they'll get their phone and they'll go and video it. So fairly light touch, but actually works really, really well. I think we're finding if you use it in the right way, you can accelerate to the point of a useful product, an MVP, really quickly. And then we're also using a lot of other tools like Synthesia to really rapidly author avatar-based content, which lands well in the store network for our people as well. So, Jeevan, I might stop there.
Thanks. That's fantastic, Damien, just to hear what's happening on the ground. Hey, just a quick question for you, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions in the chat. How are your vendors or development providers adapting to the sprint cycle?
They're kind of used to it now, and in fact, in many parts of the business, actually, we have people sit in squads and work that way. So they might be contractors. They'll sit in squads and they work that way. But we did a bit of investment up front. As you could imagine, we work with a lot of different vendors. We spend billions of dollars with third parties. And when we were designing the transformation, we actually designed learning sessions for our key ones so they could understand a little bit more intimately how we were changing the way we worked. And so it's taken some time, but we're almost 3 years in now, and so they've got to the point of understanding how we work now, and it works pretty well.
Thank you, Damien. And please feel free to ask Damien any questions. We'll probably have some questions at the end of this omnibus, but I am now going to hand over to Jason very soon, just very quickly share the results of the poll. So the returns from technology-enabled learning, or the application of technology to learning, has been sort of average, although there is an excellent, a few people have said excellent, but I guess technology has never delivered on the promise, and that's all right because it is a promise. So I think what we need to hear from Jason is his own views on the use of technology in learning, given his extensive experience, and what he sees for the days ahead. So, Jason, over to you.
Thanks, mate. Let's try to make this a bit conversational. I'm happy to answer lots of different questions as well. So I'm monitoring the chat, but I'm also happy for folks to come on mute. I'm also cognizant of time, Jeevan, noting that I think we have a hard stop in 15 minutes or so. So in terms of key areas that I think have come out of the conversation today, it's important to sort of cover the evolving, what we call the learning ecology in higher education. So the estate, so be that the data estate that underpins everything, the learning platforms that are utilized at the university ecosystem, and or the tools that are augmenting those. So with lots of conversation about generative AI, what are the actual tools that are starting to emerge in that space, and what are some of the key conversations? So I noted that folks are really keen to use generative AI, open AI, but there's also some really big risks with doing that. The big risk for me really is about the data security, privacy, all of those different things when you're putting that data inside of a black box, essentially. Where does it go? Who has access to it? What happens if it gets exposed in some way, be that by bad actors, or whether or not it just gets reflected back to someone else's hallucination? Who knows, right? So there's all these questions that come up, and there have certainly been scenarios that I've been privy to that would make IT people a little bit skeptical and a little bit hesitant to want to implement some of those things. There are ways around it, of course. So, utilizing your own data infrastructure, utilizing your own cognitive services on top of your own data estate to do those queries is a far more robust way to do that versus, just outsourcing the data to someone else. But that's another one. The other one that I've had an interest in, I don't know, Jivan, if you and I have had this conversation before around the changing role of the learning management system and whether or not it will at some point go away. Noting that, let's be honest, even the most recent learning management systems are 12 years old. So, they're a dinosaur. Let's be truthful. And what I'm starting to see is people wanting to do their learning and teaching on the platforms that they're using for collaboration. So, for example, if you're using Slack at work, being able to access your learning and teaching directly from within Slack versus having to go out to a learning management system. The other thing that's starting to emerge, and generative AI is certainly assisting in this vein, are the tools of the trade. So I'll look at Atlassian, for example. Jira, as you're building out a project in that application, instead of expecting your learning design team, your engineers, or whomever is running the project to go and do training prior to a project, able to surface things to them within those product stacks directly just in time. So the conversation I had just literally 2 days ago was around Atlassian, nudging its end users for, hey, you may have missed, an accessibility check during this particular sprint. Do you want me to add that for you? Or here's some training about, accessibility. I see that you're working on user interface design. Here are some good practices. Here's a link out to our guidance or whatever. So that sort of approach to learning and teaching, I think, especially in the enterprise world, will start becoming more common rather than expecting people to do compliance training prior to things arising. Also, the future state of classrooms, I don't believe I'm going to get time to cover what this is starting to look like. I do implore anybody on the call that is interested to reach out, and maybe we can go and hit up some friends here in Sydney. UNSW in particular are building some of the state-of-the-art classroom spaces for smaller groups of students. Definitely worth looking into, especially when we're looking at the cyber physical campus. So how do you mesh the cyber, so the online student interface, with what's happening physically in a campus? So being able to manipulate machinery, being able to manipulate devices and 3D printers, engineering materials, being able to use augmented reality without the need for headsets, without the need for devices. How do we make all of that happen to bring really rich experiences to the higher education classroom? And the knock-on effect for that is, as learners in 4 years' time are starting to graduate from university, they will have an expectation of what this experience should be when they go into the workplace. And obviously that has a knock-on effect for future learning and teaching. The future state for AI is a conversation that is big and probably beyond the scope of today's conversation, but I can tell you with a fair amount of certainty that what you're seeing today, and even some of your beta access to tools, is still very much the kernel of what there is to come. There is far deeper insights, far better algorithms that are being produced on the daily. And I think the real exciting thing is the democratization of data interrogation. So the ability for anybody in the organization with their level of privilege, and again, you can manage access rights in all different ways, will be able to look up things that are relevant to them and make decisions based on the data that they have access to that belongs to their data estate. The example I often give is more K-12 specific, because that's obviously my background. you can imagine a classroom teacher who isn't necessarily data literate in the sense of the traditional, I can go and build a Tableau dashboard, being able to go to their, I don't know, their Bing chat interface, or going to their Teams search engine, whatever it is that they're doing, and asking a question like, which of my students would work best together? And the AI knows through the data underneath the hood which students are, interested in the same kinds of topics, have the same level of capabilities in certain performance indicators. They would know who is doing better in their assessments, and actually pull groups of students together for group-based assessments. You could extrapolate that to the workplace, where which people in my organization, my 120,000 employee base, would work best together to develop a project with these outcomes. And you could actually bring those people together and then query the data to say, well, based on their known skills, going to the previous presentation where you're looking at this essential rubric with performance indicators, if you knew that about each one of your employees, you could map them together for special tasks, projects, sprints, whatever it is that you needed them to achieve. And I think that's a really exciting part of where AI is headed. And then, of course, there are lots of risks and rewards for AI, things that, I think everyone needs to be cognizant about. At some point, OpenAI will be breached. If you don't think people are already trying really hard to breach that, you're probably kidding yourself. And when it does, would you be happy with the information that you've shared within said tool? Because it could actually become exposed and that could all get leaked back. So it's just worth noting that there needs to be better governance of these tools. There needs to be better discussion, richer discussion around, yes, the use is important, but also how do we make sure that it's safe, compliant, and all of these things. An example that frightens me to no end was a study that was done, or a case that came up, where a medical student was uploading patient notes to ChatGPT to ask, hey, what possible conditions could this patient have? And using ChatGPT to obviously answer that. And that's a massive breach of pretty much every policy you could ever imagine, but you can imagine that's happening quite frequently. So there are lots of different things that we need to talk about. Jivan, how are we doing for time, sir? Like, I just know that there are others, another discussion happening after this. I'm happy to answer questions and go into any depth on pretty much any technological stack you want to talk about.
Hey, just let's run through your slides, and so let's go through that.
Yeah, quickly bounce through the next one, Matt.
Right.
So I can actually show you what some of the cyber physical campus looks like. This is the room. This is a room that was built by Dr. David Kellerman at the University of New South Wales. Some of you may have seen him present. I was fortunate to present alongside him on Tuesday about this campus experience. And you can see that it's quite different from a traditional lecture room. As a matter of fact, there are 3 different surfaces that you can write on. At the top, they're actually not currently exposed. Multiple Connect cameras. Connect cameras allow you to essentially map the room and anyone that's within it in full 3 dimensions, which means you can control everything without a controller. You can manipulate an augmented reality object without any kind of physical asset, any physical headset. You can actually just do gestures. For those that have ever used the Xbox Connect with things like Connectimals, it's basically the same technology, except it's rendering in the cloud instead. If you go to the next slide, Matt. This is what it looks like from the back of the room. So as I am presenting as the lecturer, I'm able to actually see a preview of myself, manipulating objects in real time. And in the back wall, you have all of the participants' faces showing up. Now, what makes this particularly special is the spatial audio that is in place. So each one of those faces, as they come off camera, will have a space, a physical space on that board, and you can hear exactly where that student's voice is coming from. So as the teacher, you can react. As other students, you'll actually see them turning around in the classroom to see who is speaking, and they're not trying to hunt for someone on a screen to see who is talking at that point in time. The room is entirely programmable via API. So the color of the lights, the dimming of the lights, the scenes, so the way that the screens are all manipulated and what's shown on those screens, all of that can be manipulated via API, which means we can build experiences directly, in my case, in Unreal Engine, but other tools as well, to change the look and feel and what's being presented on screen to match. So students are getting a truly immersive experience, be they face-to-face or in a high-flex environment. This is what it looks like. Obviously, we can't capture in a photographic means, but this is David presenting. He's got the full chat happening in real time, so he's able to answer questions in real time, and you can see the manipulation of a 3D object. This could be literally anything. So there are examples that we are working on. For example, in structural engineering, building a building, getting students within a game engine to build their own buildings. That's part of the game, kind of like Minecraft, and then having them placed virtually but physically on a shake table, so like an earthquake simulation. So the table is real, but we're placing them virtually on that shake table, and the teacher is able to manipulate the shake table, change the ratings, and then we're able to use virtual sensors within the game engine to see how that body reacts to what's happening. So we're getting that whole physical cyber meeting in between. It's a very powerful tool. You can move forward, please, Matt. That's about it. Yeah.
Hey, thanks, Jason. A quick question. Look, fantastic classroom setups, right? And if you know that, mostly what we have in a corporate setup is, just some places to sit and a PowerPoint presentation, maybe a whiteboard, interactive whiteboard. It looks like the rooms that you've shown us require a lot of capital investment, right? So,
you'd be surprised. Yeah. So I mean, the first time you do anything like this, it's always going to be massively more expensive than as you repeat that and scale that, but it's cost less than an actual lecture theatre does today.
And is it portable? Like, does this equipment be set up in a room and you kind of easily move it to the other rooms? Yeah.
This is built to not be portable, so it is. You'll see on the ground there are no cables. There's no true hazards, right? It's built into the infrastructure itself. There's actually a cooled server room that sits off to the side that's soundproofed and insulated. That side of it is certainly not movable, but there are certain components that are, like a Kinect camera. You can totally make that portable. That's a Surface Hub that you're seeing in the background, so you're able to bring that and move that around. The podium, which was custom made, that could be moved around as well. So it just depends. There are different variants of this, and there are certainly some organizations that have similar setups within their businesses as well. It just kind of depends what you're hoping for.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks very much for that. That was excellent. And please do direct any questions to Jason on the chat. I'll just, I guess, use the slide as a segue to our next panel on L&D capability. But just quickly putting some of the discussions into play is that, and the favorite LMS is there too. But essentially what I guess this is just my thoughts, is that there was a capability jump before 2016, when we went from classroom training to the most exciting thing in the world, learning management system and online courses, right, in 2016. And so that was a massive change in ways how learning was done in organization, therefore the skill sets and the type of people required in L&D. So, that capability jump has happened around 2016. It's matured. And the next jump was kind of the incorporating the social YouTube kind of components into our learning solutions. That the jury is still out. There were a lot of challenges, so I'm not sure that's necessarily happened. But I think the next jump up, which is coming, is this use of AI in all aspects of learning and how learners are going to use AI. And this is where I guess my questions are going to be the panel towards the end of the session. So if I were to just go to the next slide, what we are saying is that as we go up each jump, the stuff that was delivered by L&D professionals seem to be decreasing, and this is just my opinion. So with online learning, it was more technology delivering and less of L&D professionals delivering the whole of learning, and it's kind of increased progressively to the extent with the advent of AI. The question I guess we have to discuss, and this is where, is that the things that can be done by L&D, in fact, even probably, can they actually be involved in the design of learning solutions which rely heavily on AI? It will potentially decrease quite significantly, and how quickly that will happen, we don't know. There are obviously some challenges and roadblocks, but it is possible. It's probably, as Joyce said, moving faster than we think. So the whole question is really, then what does the profession do? Surprisingly, I was talking to John Forrest, and he said, of all the things that L&D professionals do, which is the one thing that you think AI will find it difficult to replace? And I said, without hesitation, a good classroom trainer, teaching topics on personal improvement and, just where a person needs to have a transformation of mindset. I think that's going to be difficult. Everything else, I think, could be. So something to chew on. But I'm going to go on to the next panel, which is on L&D skills and capability. As you can see from our poll, we are mostly there, but I suspect if we quite don't know where we're headed towards. So it'll be interesting to see where the discussion goes. But I'm going to hand it over to Vanessa, who's going to talk about her personal journey, and this is quite instructive of the way L&D is changing and the people within it. So Vanessa, over to you.
Thanks, Jivan. Hello, everyone. I'm back. Okay, so Jivan asked me to share my personal career journey, and I think it harks back to when we first met each other. He said to me, "You don't come from an L&D background, do you?" And the answer to that is no. So I nearly put the actual spelling. So if you have a look, you can see that my degree, and you can spell it out, Bachelor of Information Technology Communication Honours. Yes, I'm a BITCH Class 1. They have since rearranged the title around. And that actually degree was even introduced because they were finding in the workplace at that time that there was an imbalance or a disconnect between people who had technology skills and could talk about business systems and people who could talk to the business and have meaningful stakeholder kinds of conversations. So that's actually where that degree came from. So it's interesting that we continue to be involved in conversations about human skills or universal skills. Don't like the word soft, they're not soft. And my role when I went into my first job as a management consultant was coding, testing, analysing, designing, configuring. So I really started at that spectrum. And that was in various industries that you can see there. Then I kind of plugged into the system and was a contractor, my first foray into banking, and then starting to move a little bit out of the real guts of the system, if you like, and moving into that balance of stakeholder management, but as a contractor, as an independent person that you plugged into and out of the system, in some ways in that agile way that Damien talked about. Then moved into the place where really I moved into that learning and development space, because one of the things that I'd really taken away from when we were in management consulting, we didn't actually call it learning and development. We called it change management services or chicks making slides, which we would, of course, never say now. But it became really clear to me very quickly that the best system or the best product or the best process, even the best people with the best of intentions, did not deliver the intended impact if change management, including learning and development, had not been successful. So I really became quite interested and fixated in how do you make this thing that you've worked so hard on and delivers or has the capacity and the capability to deliver would actually stick. And it's that whole idea of people were talking about products and why we have product owners. You can have the best product, but if people don't buy it, it actually won't deliver anything. So in my time at a little company called Nestle, so I moved into a much larger organisation. I started off there as someone working in systems, put my hand up to move into learning and development, and eventually crafted a role that didn't exist called learning effectiveness lead. So really moved into that learning effectiveness space and really touching on so many things about how do you drive collaboration, how do you work backwards, how do you make sure that learning matters in that FMCG global space. And learning and development in a really small bank called UBank, which was about 500 colleagues. I went from 300,000 to about 500. And where I sit now, which is actually National Australia Bank, where I work in enterprise learning advisory. So I've really gone from nuts and bolts coding, testing, and then moved to an advisory position of helping people do their job. So why has Jivan asked me to share that, or what, next slide please, Jivan, did I learn from all of this? Oh, we've got to build. Along the way, I learned that maybe we need another hit intro. Yes, success is symbiotic. So business systems or process data, technology, whatever it is that we want to plug into that, plus change management. And I'm using change management because someone on the chat also talked about the importance of change. And I actually think learning needs to be incorporated into that, because all of this business system design is change, learning is change management is change. So for me, it's all that, because, and we'll start to see some more about that, as I'd said before, you need intended impact. It is a balance of art and science. And I get quite pernickety about words. I think all learning professionals do. For me, it's learning for performance. It's not learning and development. That's what it is. Because next slide, Jivan. 3 top developmental skills for me. And I've used the word curious, and I've used human skills. So Maree, tapping into what you talked about, what is safe from AI, but what is it that really is our value add? And I think that's something we talk about a lot. And I've added curious because I think sometimes we get so fixated on what we do or what we know or what we're being asked to deliver with our service mentality. So the first one you can see there is curious critical thinking. And how do we do that? It's by applying a so what filter. And by that, I mean asking ourselves, so what, all the time. So what is the why? And it's that backwards thinking and backwards design that we talked about. So what does success look like? Why are we doing anything anyway? How we know that we've got there. So what are the measures or observations that we're looking for? And a question that can really bear some interesting fruit is, so what if we don't? Because sometimes, and I'm a bit in this cycle at the moment, we can get caught up in the busyness of the business asking us to do something and hashtag optics. But if we don't do anything, it can be a good way sometimes to realize, are we working on the thing that matters most? Because of course, time and people are limited resources. So sometimes we ask, so what if we don't? I've asked that question and been told people could go to jail because we will not be compliant. Or sometimes the answer is not much. So it won't be a big deal. And then, of course, further in the cycle, so what did or didn't happen? So sometimes we do things and it falls into a learning black hole, or it falls into a black hole. We don't know what happened when people got back to the job, or we don't know what happened next in the story. So we do need to know, did it bear the fruit that we had expected? And if not, why not? And if so, why? So that we can build on it. So it doesn't really quite matter if it did or didn't happen so much as we need to know, what next? What do we do about it? Do we replicate elsewhere in the business? Do we mitigate? What are the actions? Curious courage, by finding joy in the challenge. Actually found this morning, Harvard School Health actually talked about happiness is emotion and joy is mindset. So I really quite liked that. So we need to find joy in the challenge, because this is easy to say. And I've been a learning practitioner for a while now. It's difficult to do. So we need to embrace our expertise. I think lots of people can discount learning as a profession and the expertise in it. And it's that whole, well, everybody can teach somebody something, but we do have expertise, and we've heard lots about that today. And we should expect theirs. And by theirs, I mean the business and the people that we collaborate with. And to do that, we should respectfully challenge and ask smart questions and be brave. And if you haven't, check out Radical Candor, and it's all about challenging respectfully because we care. And I think that there's a lot in that for us as learning professionals. And often that means sit with the uncomfortable silence. And sometimes we ask a question and people don't know an answer. And one of my favorites is 6 months from now, if I ask you, did we do the right thing? Was it worth it? Did it deliver what you expected? What will you think about before you answer? What will you reflect on? And that takes us back to measures and observations and getting clarity around expectations. And if people don't have a good answer for that, sometimes we need to sit and wait, because I, perhaps just talking about me, can rush in and want to answer those questions and plug those holes, but that isn't my question to answer. And then the final one there is curious collaboration. And it's about acting more as a partner rather than a provider. And I actually used to go around with a sticker that had a cross through a burger. So I don't deliver fast food learning. You don't get to pop up at the fast food window that was my desk and ask for, can I have an e-learn with a side of knowledge-based articles and those sorts of things. So it became a bit of a joke, but it was part of the re-education of my partners to say, I'm here as a strategic partner and to be tactical where that's the right thing to do, but not just to respond to what you think is the right answer. Let's be partners and have that conversation and understand what it is that we're actually trying to do and if it's the right thing. And I really like that how Joyce talked about at elbow, and often we find that's the right answer. We don't need a big set piece. We just need to help people and meet them where they are. And all of that comes back to curious collaboration with shared skin in the game. It has to be with the business. And then we don't get into those protracted discussions that sometimes can happen about you did this, it didn't deliver, or it did deliver, and here are all the other variables that were happening in the market or elsewhere in the business at the time, because we're in it together. Really changes the tones of the conversations that you can have. We work here at NAB with something called a success triangle, and we ask if something is or isn't happening, are people clear about what they need to do and the expectations? Are they capable? Which doesn't just mean capability, it also means the systems and the environment that they work in. And are they motivated? And sometimes, and usually, it's a combination of those three. So it's not always learning in and of itself or at all that we need to pull as a lever. Sometimes there's something else. And finally here for me, it's learning as a means to the ends of change, that word again. It's not the end, like we don't go like that. We learned them something or taught them something and we're done, or we served up some tasty e-learning. It's not the end or the beginning. We need to have some upstream and downstream. It's about, and I really like this notion that I read about on my travels the other day of learning intentions. And again, that shift in accountability, because I will have an intention when I design a learning experience or work with the business, but the outcomes are something that are contextual and have accountability with the leaders and the learners themselves. So they're my top three that I, opinion only, developmental skills or mindsets for L&D. Next slide, please, Jivan. And in terms of org improvements, you can see the classic hammer and the nail there. This comes from my son, who's a creative, and I think the first one is kill your darlings. We do tend to have a heavy reliance on set pieces, and by that I mean content, events, busyness and shininess. So we get caught up in video or short form, and it might be the right answer. I think too often we have a solution that we go off in search of a problem for it to fit so that we can be seen to be at the forefront. Years ago, MOOCs were the big thing, and the place I worked was obsessed with MOOCs, and I can tell you that we never really stood one up, and it was never really the answer to the challenges that we were facing or the opportunities to deliver value we had. Veer away from those vanity metrics that we like, the thumbs up and how many completions or how many hours, and let's move towards actionable insights, and that harks back to the so what, and it is that letting go. And something we've talked about a lot today, agile assets. We know that they take effort and upkeep. So we want to make sure we've got accessibility to the people that we need to work with, as well as to the operating system that they already have, be that stand-up meetings or tools they already use, that whole idea of meet them where they are. We want to align with those things rather than do something to them and separate, and just really become part of the fabric. And that's, you can call that learning in the flow of work if you like, and adopt and adapt. So rather than create something else, if we plug into what's already existed and already has gone through some sort of change management process, it makes everything a little easier and make more sense. And the second one is to reframe learning. I know in working in a bank, there's a lot of compliance learning that does necessarily need to be done, but it's not an event or a tick box. We're actually learning all the time. We're just not conscious of it. So we want to make sure that we do position it as part of a journey, and it's the how of success. It's not like a separate side of desk thing that we do separately and because someone's come and beaten you up with a stick. Accountability is something that I see a lot that we need to, with this idea of collaboration as well. We need to make sure that the business is creating context with learners and leaders as well, that there is opportunity to learn and apply, and that there is follow up and follow through. And those are things that we can support through enablers, but I don't believe should take ownership of. So I actually think that in some ways that's the most powerful place that we can play in, is providing enablers that helps with the how and meeting people where they are. So again, that may or may not be something that's familiar to us, the familiar hammer and nail situation that we have although I do think it's an opportunity that we're seeing with AI and things like that. I think that might be it, Jivan. I might have actually got through it super fast.
Yes, you did. And look, just a quick one on this framework that we developed 4 years ago in terms of maybe a T-shaped capability framework for identity professionals. It's there in the PDF, something to look at, revisit, but it's interesting to kind of go back in time to see that a lot of that is still the same. So it'll be interesting to get your comments. Now, I think that's where we finish. Thank you for staying this long. What we might do now, and if anybody is has to go, that's fine. We might actually just switch on our cameras and just get into a chinwag about a couple of themes that I've picked up from our presentation and also discussion online. So, hey everyone, feel free to kind of just start your cameras and participate, unmute, and participate in the discussion. Because the first question that I have is, all this discussion, have we come to a point where ADDIE is no longer required or relevant? And I say this because there's nothing in ADDIE which can't be replicated in the Agile method, for example, provided it's done properly and has the right team and resources. So, is it time to move away from ADDIE? Although I think ADDIE is kind of more akin to the waterfall style, and in some cases, that is appropriate for some learning solutions. But any thoughts, anyone? So please feel free to just speak. Maybe we start with Damien and Joyce to begin with, and then I know there are lots of expert learning specialists in here, so happy to hear from everyone. So anyone, please.
Look, just my 2 cents, Jivan. I think, if a framework like ADDIE is helping people go about the design process in a structured way and creating value, then I think it's going to add value for some people. What I would say, and I think probably you flag it in your comments, is we should always be curious about what next, what's reshaping the capabilities we need to be really good at our job. And it might be a case of, I might use it as my foundation, but adopt some different things to supplement that, or to try a different approach, rather than say, well, it's time to throw it out and move wholly to something else. I think the concept of experiment, test, and learn, and trying new things should be part of everyone's lexicon, regardless of whether you're a learning person or a product person or a tech person, because things change so rapidly.
Thanks, Damien. Joyce, any thoughts on, if you're still around?
Yes, I think we have the process that we use to design learning solutions is that we've basically divided the space in which we work into 3 spaces. The first being the problem space. So us really understanding the problems that our learners have and mapping that out quite without even thinking about what we need to do. So it's really understanding that space and understanding the problems and challenges of those customers. Then once we know that, we move to the strategy space, where we kind of decide which are the challenges that we think we are in a good strategic position to actually address. Because there might be things that you actually are not in a good position to address. So you kind of make a strategic decision about which challenge you're going to address. And then we move into the solution space. And that is where you actually begin to design the thing. And the way I always distinguish between those two, the strategy space and the solution space, is the strategy space is building the right thing. And then the solution space is building the thing right. So I suppose it's still that focus where you really start with the needs analysis, but now it's about doing it kind of like at the systems level rather than maybe at the single learning solution that you are developing.
Thanks, Joyce. So because I think there is, I guess, some efficiency in the ADDIE method, so you can kind of build in bulk. And obviously the agile method is pretty intense, so there is no let up. So it's quite interesting, but essentially anything that's there in ADDIE could be incorporated in agile method. And I only asked that question because using the ADDIE method, we haven't had too much success in terms of we kind of just produce solutions which might not meet the actual requirements. So we actually haven't done the needs analysis well enough, even though it's part of ADDIE, the first prompt. So, but kind of forcing us through the discipline of agile, and that too with the caveat that's actually done properly with the right skills, might actually provide the robustness which unfortunately ADDIE is lacking. So it might be great in the design and development, but the other bits, I'm not too sure it's that strong. Something to Damien, Joyce, if you've got any comments, or anybody else actually, just feel free to chip in. It's pretty much a chin wag from now on.
I think for me, it comes back to a little bit of, you say ADDIE, and I honestly, if I wanted to just say what all those letters meant, I'd have to go and Google it. So I think there's a balance between how much do we want to hang our hat on a formal scaffold and framework, and how much is, getting in amongst the reads with the business and understanding what they need. Like, I think there's a certain amount of intuition to it as well. And I'm not saying that there's not science, but and then you could call it performance consulting. So it's a little bit by any other name. I've seen 5Ds, and there's ADDIE, and there's performance consulting, and we kind of get so caught up in creating scaffolds and templates, which I agree, Damien, have their value for sure. That said, I personally don't get too hung up on what they are, but maybe that's an indictment on me.
Look, I think that's sensible, Joyce. And also, Vanessa, whatever approach works best for that particular context and for that particular situation. So, I completely, I think that's where the art of the learning professional is, to find out and use from this whole repository of tools, not just the more shiny thing that's working or that's current at the moment, and select it appropriately and use it appropriately. No, thanks for that, everyone. Just the last question on the impact of AI on L&D professionals and the work that we do. I think just did a very quick poll already. I don't know if I can share the poll, but essentially there are quite 55% of the people said the work they will be doing next year is going to be different from what they did in 2023. And there's only very 9%. They said that there's very little change in the work they do. So there's quite a few things that will be different for us next year. But just on the impact of AI on the L&D professionals, actually before that, very quick question. Have we, as learning professionals, need to move from a mindset of being the owners, in inverted commas, of learners to enablers of learners, right? Which means that we really don't have a policing role or an enforcing role, and more of just being that, consultant, to use Vanessa's terminology, who jumps in, assesses situations, and then enables learning to happen either at the individual level, team level, or the organization level. So, and the second statement for that is that we actually do not see ourselves as owners or having authority over the learning domain. So any thoughts on that from anyone?
Just typing in, Jevan, so maybe rather than type, I'll comment. Bottom line is we can't learn for anyone else. Learning is something that an individual does. We can help them with the process, but we can't do it for them. So I think, considering what's our role to help the process of learning, how do we make it easy? How do we encourage the right culture? How do we provide the tools that help accelerate that? How do we foster the scaffolding so you've got the right connection, etc.? But I always start with that. You can't learn for someone else. You can help them do it for themselves, but you have to be the enabler.
Thanks, Damien. Anybody else with any thoughts?
Perhaps just extending that a little bit is to, I suppose ultimately our role is about performance, not just learning. So what we can do to create the environment, the context that supports learning, but then actually enables performance as well. So taking it that one step further, I think, should always be a lens that we put, certainly within a kind of commercial corporate environments.
Oh, look, absolutely. That I think that's an absolutely great comment, and I think we're going to finish now. So, look, it's been a marathon session, and I was wondering whether it should be 1.5 or 2 hours. But I think because we were kind of doing a learning cafe after a long time, I said might as well fit it in as much as I could. So thank you for staying till the end of the 2 hours. I think the content's been good, though. I really gained a lot. I've been making notes furiously, and there's been great discussion happening in the chat. So I think if there are any questions anybody would like to raise now, please do raise them to either the panel or anybody else in the audience. Otherwise, we'll look to finish 5 minutes early. But I'll just silent for about 5-10 seconds to see if anybody's got any questions or comments.
I have one comment, if I may, going
Sure.
back to the ADDIE, and does it still have value? I think the A and the D, the analysis and the design, still have value. They may be getting done very differently in the present than they used to get done in the past, but I think even with Agile, my feeling is you have to show up at the table with something to start with, and you may discard it immediately. It's like the Civil War generals said that, battle plan's great until someone fires the first shot. But I think that you can still, in terms of analysis, as a instructional designer myself, I consider myself a professional newbie. Okay, I can talk to someone who's an expert, and I can represent the new person, because the expert, even myself in some ways, can't put themselves back into the shoes of somebody brand new without a little nudging and well, what is the sequence to this? Is this what you need to know first? And so I don't think that the A and the D go out of style, although they may change quite a bit.
Thank you, Michael. That's absolutely correct, and that'll be an interesting discussion. Kind of going forward, and maybe we have some kind of a hybrid solution which utilizes parts of best depending on the situation, of course. So no, thank you very much. And if there is no other questions, I'll hold silence for 5 seconds and before we finish that. Okay, looks like everyone wants to go, including myself. I'm feeling hungry. Hey, so thanks everyone who's managed to stay on till the end, and everybody who did stay for parts of the presentation. And it's look, hey, this is what Learning Cafe webinars are about. If you like the content and if you want to stay. If you don't like it, or if it's not value for it, no problems, at all. If you can hold your interest, that's fantastic. If you can't, you've got better things to do. So we hope to continue this in 2024. We've got a few exciting things happening in product management space, which is a very relevant after the discussion today, plus the AI collabs. So yeah, please do sign up for the newsletter, and it'll keep you informed of everything that's going on. So hey, thank you very much. I want to thank Neil for not only supporting the webinar, but also keeping the chat going with his fantastic knowledge about AI and most things in life. And thanks to all the participants. So that's where we finish. Thank you very much.